We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
G'day and welcome to another episode of the Mankind Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Clift. Now, in an ever-changing and rapidly moving social, cultural, and political climate, it seems today that it's really never been more of an interesting and tricky time in history to be a man. Now, before you jump on the boat of how can a man say that they are facing challenges, let's really zoom out here and identify that across the board, through headlines, conversations, and debates, men are being called out for their behaviors. And society's magnifying glass really has never been more fixated on the actions of men, specifically those in leadership. Now, whether you agree or disagree with the way that men are being called out within organizations, companies, communities, or perhaps even at the dinner table, your dinner table perhaps, there really appears to be a lot of kind of no man's land in which people find themselves. You've either got those on one side that believe that the way we've always done things is the way it should be, and then you might have another side that is saying that down with the patriarchy, men suck, we need to remove men from leadership, promote more women. Yet most of us find ourselves in that no man's land, I myself included, of, well, really, how have we gotten here? How have we gotten to this place today in 2022 where yes, men are being held account to their actions. And yes, there are a lot of men that feel like they are unjustly being highlighted or spotlighted, and fingers are being pointed left and right. This is why I wanted to bring back a fan favorite of the show, Dene Maria Sebastiana, who in his book, Fierce and Tender, Healing the Deep Masculine, he really portrays his story of growing up as a young kid in the mean streets of New York in gangs through the 50s, 60s, 70s, all the way into the sexual and psychedelic revolution. Dene's story in this book really does, if for me as a young person, showcase how we as men have gotten to where we are and our paradigms and our belief systems around what is masculinity, what is manhood, how do I turn up as a man? And I believe it's through Dene's lens that we can really take a snapshot of the past 50, 60, 70 years and identify why there is so much pushback and such a movement to remove a lot of men from power. Why, as well, there is a lot of pushback from those that don't believe that that is the right thing to do nor a just thing to do. Wherever you land in your feelings and your beliefs around this topic, I believe you're going to enjoy this two-part series where I interview Dene around his story, the examples that he showcases in the book, and how it all pertains to fatherhood, marriage, sex life, boyhood, psychology, all the above. As you know, if you've listened to Dene on the show before, these interviews can go just about anywhere and just about as wide and deep as you want it to go. So just know that you need to buckle up and enjoy the next hour or two that I spend with Dene as we dive into his book and his story of Fierce and Tender, Healing the Deep Masculine. Enjoy. G'day and welcome to another episode of the Mankind Podcast. Today we are joined by Dene Maria Sebastiana. He is a native New Yorker, a teacher, a master coach, a medicine man, and he is a current leader emeritus and the former executive director of the Mankind Project. And Dene has initiated open men's circles in many communities throughout the US and Mexico for more than 35 years. Dene's work teaches men, women, and couples how to break through their unconscious patterns, emerging more authentic, self-aware, and open-hearted. And what I believe he brings to the table more than anything is the perfect balance between love and fierceness. Fierceness and that tender ability to meet someone where they're at and help them with the healing that they need without the absence of that directness, that assertiveness, that hard landing message I've often told my friends through my time having Dene as my coach is that his lessons can land like the touch of a feather or a kick between the legs, depending what's necessary at the time. So Dene, thanks for joining us, brother.
Thank you. That's very lovely.
Well, and thanks for joining us again. For those of you that are new to the show and jumping on at this point, Dene's been on many times to talk about emotional responsibility, emotional maturity, manhood, masculinity, how it's all getting, it's kind of a hotbed of conversation, debate, argument, conflict in the world as it is today in 2022. So I'm excited to have Dene join us as we talk about his new book, Fierce and Tender. Brother, let me ask you first and foremost, what was your calling to write this book and why?
This book took me 18 months of direct work in building the arc and aligning it and cobbling all the pieces together and writing the connective tissue. But the truth is, my journey started a long, long time ago. I was journaling, doing dream journals in my 20s when I was in Jungian analysis. So I've always been a pretty prolific dreamer. And I found that my dream world offered me incredible magic and healing possibilities. So I've got 15 or 20 dream journals dating back for, 35, 40 years. And I plucked some of the material out and all the articles and things that I've done, getting the arc and getting the pieces in place was really the hard part. But once I had the arc clear, then the writing kind of flowed. But, it took me 18 months, but it's a life story. This is a memoir, which is, according to my writing coach, a memoir means it's almost all true. But the writer has the freedom to embellish that. So if they made a movie out of this, it would say, based on a true story.
I like it.
But it's a good piece. It's a good piece of writing. It helped me pull out some unfinished pieces. It helped me come to terms and bury some ghosts. It helped me come more into the present and who I am now and what I stand for and the work that I need to put into the world at this, last quarter of my life. It's been a great gift to me, and I hope it can be a great gift to others.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I'd like to start, we've been able to have you come on a couple times where we've just been able to tap into your insights and your wisdom, and we've heard little parts of your story, but I'd like to kind of jump to the beginning to help us better understand not just you and the importance of this book and what people can take away, but the world that you've witnessed since your beginning and how the world relates to manhood and masculinity. And now today, with having had with the Me Too movement, with a lot of conversations around toxic masculinity popping up, not just in adult conversations, but happening at school. I think by telling your story and tracking it to today, it would be a great parallel to what we're experiencing today as well. So, Dene, I understand, mate, you're a child of the 50s, and it was a pretty rough start, eh?
I was, the second boomer year, which was 1947. The boomers started from 46 to 64. I was born in 47 in Yonkers, New York, about 6 blocks from the borderline with the Bronx, in a dead-end neighborhood. My dad was a factory worker. We were working class, multi-ethnic families in the neighborhood. There was a schoolyard right across the street, which was just a convenient backdrop for all kinds of interesting activities that went on, including gang stuff and sports and girls. And I was at 9 years old when I was initiated into the Halos street gang. It was a loose affiliation. What I liked about the Halos was they had these really cool satin jackets. They had a black satin jacket with pink piping that said Halos across the back. Elvis Presley was come online and all the diddy bop outfits that showed up in rock and roll, I was smitten with that thing. And I coveted and I wanted one. But I was, I was young. I was small. I'm still small. I was never, much of brawn. But I made my way, in and out of this street people because I was smart, because I knew baseball and was a really good athlete, because I could sing the rock and roll music and wiggle the hips. So, I made it into the company of the street toughs, and they kind of liked me, and they took me on like as a little mascot. But membership in the gang required that a couple of things. Number one, every guy in the gang got to punch me, and my job was to not cry. And the second was to fight another kid about my size, and to either kick ass or get my ass kicked, or a little bit of both. And I was able to do that and hang out with these guys. My book really tells the story of growing up on the New York streets in the 50s. I've seen films of this genre. I think this would be a great story for a film. But as I write in this book, as I've thought about my childhood and the arc of my healing trajectory, and having found what was it in my beginning of my life that had me find men's work. In our Warrior Weekend, we say that there's a connection between the wound and the mission. There's little shadow pieces and commentaries about that relationship that are being looked into. But I believe that there is a relationship. And in my childhood, my father and my grandfather, who were from Iran, my grandfather and grandmother came around the turn of the century from Iran. They were Persian, Assyrians. My dad was born here. My mom's parents were from Sicily, and she was born here. So, I have a dark skin birthing. And I grew up in a multi-ethnic neighborhood. And my father and my grandfather were at war with each other, physical war with each other. We had cops come to our house once a month for as long as I can remember through my childhood. We left at 11. My father and my grandfather had their huge explosion, and I have this written this chapter in the book. But I was born into violence, misogyny, racism, homophobia. I was born into an environment where all of those things were believed, valued, and fostered. And my first initiation into that street gang was a violent one. And I was not allowed to express the pain that I had in that experience. And I think that sets me up for my belief that the programming that men have gone through to be tough, to be violent, to be in control, to be homophobic, all the man box definitions I got birthed with in my early childhood. So how it led to doing this work is quite miraculous. But I followed the thread of what initiation is. It's like, being taken out of my comfort zone and thrust down into some underworld and have to engage some demons and dragons and, take back the gold in some way. My astrologer said, your chart is born for initiation. So it's little wonder that my childhood, my astrological chart, my magnetic center that found the initiatory places throughout the course of my life would lead me here. And this book is my humble attempt to tell that story. And it's a fascinating story.
Yeah, it sure is. Sure is. I was able to get my hands on a copy myself, and a little bit I've been able to get through so far has been deeply insightful. I mean, I knew parts of your story because of our relationship, but there's a whole lot more there than I was prepared for. And it makes sense why the gang was so attractive to you from such a young age. I mean, of course, you've got the outward showing of being a part of something, being tougher, being on a higher status symbol because you're part of this gang, but also what needs were being met for you in this gang that you weren't getting at home because of the situations that were happening there.
I got to belong. I got to do my thing. I got to play ball with them. I got to run with them. I got to listen to music and go to dances and chase girls with them. You know, I got to watch them, you know, get their cars and souped up cars and drive up and down the block. You know, in the 50s was a magical time for American cars. So, you know, there was a great gift for me. And Brandon, I don't know why or how this is, but I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. But I can remember so much of my childhood with crystal clarity. I can even smell the smells. I can see the shadows and all of the colors in my childhood. I have incredible recall and a great vivid imagination. So I was able to cobble these stories in a very interesting and tragic comic way.
Sure. I can only imagine going back to each of those moments as you're writing this book, how cathartic that would have been. Also the joy that would have come from many of it as well, that this retelling as you've typed it onto the page. So that makes complete sense. I mean, the conversations I've had with those that have joined gangs, both inside and outside of prison, for those that have felt the calling to join fraternities and go through the hazing process, being able to ask them what was really the roots of it. Like, you know, the girls, right, the cars, sure, but really the root of it for a lot of these men was connection. They weren't the belonging. They were not getting that elsewhere. And that relates, you mentioned the man box for just previously. For those listening that haven't heard of the Act Like a Man box, it's basically the unspoken rules, or the spoken and unspoken rules of the playground for young boys. Don't be a girl, don't be gay, don't be weak, don't be a sissy, right? Don't show emotions, be tough, control others, dominate others, right? Use aggression, but don't use sadness. These are things that we learn from a young age, and that people assume that it ends once you leave school. No, that becomes the modus operandi for all through life. So
I was on the New York Times arts section today online, and the Cannes Film Festival is happening. And I like film. I've loved film. I've been going to the movies since I was a little pup. And I noticed they had Tom Cruise on with his, Top Gun story.
Oh yeah.
And I looked at a variety of the films, and while there are many films that have expanded topics, men continue to show up in challenging, trying, violent experiences. And they get top billing, they get the good stories, that violence remains in our daily view every day.
Yeah.
So is it little wonder that the world is the way it is?
Naturally.
I don't know if we're born that way, or we're programmed that way, or or our astrology time mandates that we act like that.
Yeah.
But it feels like we've run out of wiggle room for us to tolerate that very much longer. Because I believe if we don't begin challenging men's violence and the way men are brought up and reared and programmed, if we don't challenge that, we're in deep shit.
Oh yeah. Well, you grew up with John Wayne on the movie screen. Did he solve things with his words and logic, or did he solve them with his fist and a pistol?
His fist and his pistol.
Bingo. So that was the archetype of man for so many people, because guess what? Dad may not have fit the bill for what we needed as a kid, right? Yes. And we're raised to think that, hey, dad is manhood, mom is womanhood, dad female masculine, mom female feminine, and That's our model. That's for those of us that, of course, had a father in the household. If not, who was the closest next male figure?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It sounds like you were getting it from the older guys in the halos.
Yes.
And not, and I'm sure getting some messages from
but
dad.
my dad was in the house. My grandfather was in the house. I watched them be violent with each other.
Mm.
So it wasn't any different. They were fighting each other. My dad may have paddled my ass 3 or 4 times in my whole life, and always with ample warning. He was not violent with me. He was not violent with my mom or my brother, but he was violent with his father.
Mm.
So I wasn't getting physically assaulted in my household, but it was happening on the street because most of the kids came down, their fathers were kicking their ass.
Mm.
And shit rolls downhill, and fighting happens as a way to resolve conflict. There was no negotiation. It was fisticuffs to solve problems. That's what we learned. That's what I learned.
So let's look at, we've gone to childhood and moving into teen years. Let's look at early adulthood. What changed, if not what was continually enforced for you as you built your identity as a man?
Well, I went to college in the fall of 1965. The war was just beginning to accelerate.
Mm.
I went to a very left-wing liberal arts college in upstate New York. And I was in favor of the war when I was in high school. I even thought about applying to West Point when I was in high school.
Wow, really?
I got hardened, I got toughened. I thought it was the way to do it. But when I went off to school and sat in the student union and in the cafeterias and heard the conversations about what was really going on with the war in Vietnam, suddenly I had my first huge awakening. It's like, wow, all isn't the way they say that it is. And when I brought that home, my father, who was working class, blue collar, World War II veteran, pro-war, we began to have conversations that ultimately turned into arguments over the war.
Yeah.
And I imagine that so many households in the 60s and early 70s that had father-son wars just like me, guys from my generation, having these conversations with their blue-collar fathers, that our culture in the 60s split right down the middle. It was a cultural revolution. And rock and roll was the anthem music that we played, and Vietnam War was the place that we rallied around. I think and hold in my heart and believe that the psychedelic movement was the awakening of the Aquarian age. And we are in that overlap between the ending of the Piscean age and the beginning of the Aquarian age, where those values are in direct conflict with each other. And I think that's what we're noticing with all the places that we see in darkness on the planet. We begin to see pockets of light arising as well. And I think that overlap is going to last a while.
I got a question for you. That high school experience where you were pro-war, and then college where your mind was open to the opposite. I want to ask you, was it so much a call to arms as a patriot and it being the right thing to do, or was it more a call to arms of Dene wanting to prove something to himself as a man, as that's what men did? They go off and fight.
I thought that I knew that I was angry when I was a teenager. I was really angry. I thought the army would do me good, put some hair on my chest, give me a place to vent out some of my frustration. But then, Kennedy got assassinated. The war escalated. I had my first psychedelic experience in my end of my freshman year. Lights were going on inside my being that was diametrically opposed to what I had believed and had programmed to be, suddenly there's this great awakening inside me, and I have no idea who the fuck I am.
Yeah. Black and white becomes gray, huh?
It becomes gray. So sex, drugs, and rock and roll was an easy escape.
Yeah.
And that's what I did for many, many years. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Mm. So sex, drugs, and rock and roll. In my mind, I think that, oh, well, this must have been the softening of Dene. This must have been the, where this hard male archetype would begin to get softened. But was that the case? Or did those hard lessons and messages of manhood and masculinity, that stuff just carry through all of that?
I think through college and the first few years after college, I was pretty hardcore. Drugs began to get ugly as the 60s turned into the 70s. Cocaine and heroin began to replace pot and hashish. Mm-hmm. And drugs got a whole lot darker, and it became more dangerous for me. And I knew that, that I took drugs. When I took drugs, I always believed that my spirit was stronger than that medicine, until I ran into heroin. Then I realized that my spirit was not stronger than this drug, and I was in trouble if I stayed with it. So that was an awakening for me that turned me away from drugs. Shortly thereafter, I was on the road for a while, which was hardcore and ugly. But when I came back to New York, I got into therapy. My first mentor was a woman that I went to work for her brother's company. A friend of mine from school was the son. And I began to work for that company, and she was my first mentor. And she saw right through me. She looked at me one day and she said, I've never seen anybody with eyes that have as much pain as yours do, other than mine when I was your age. She saw me. She saw the vacancy in my eyes. She saw the ache underneath all of my, hip slick and cool outside demeanor. She saw the pain inside me. And she helped me reclaim my heart, Brandon. She saved my life at a time where my life was going downhill. She saw me, she saw my pain. I knew that I was walking around with this big hole in my chest. I didn't know what it was, didn't even know how to describe it other than I got this big fucking hole in my chest. She got me into therapy and started my healing journey. I was 24 years old when that started.
Wow. That's serendipitous, because that's around the age I got involved in this stuff. So good time, because some blokes, it's a later calling.
We've seen so many men, middle-aged men, 40s, 50s, 60s, come into our work, and they're fucking desperate.
Yeah, it's never too late, and it's never too late. But if you can get in early, that helps.
You're luckier.
Yeah. So, in the book, one of the earliest pages, you wrote something that really landed for me. So I'm going to read it. Okay. You say that current identity politics has us at war everywhere. It's hard to know what is right, true, and trustworthy. Men at many levels are under attack. Many believe that all men are toxic. And this will come up later in our conversation, I'm sure. The hashtag #MeToo movement opened women's voices and opened many eyes to see the dark underbelly of our collective gender and sexual behaviors and the long-time global mistreatment of women. That voice is long overdue, and we all need to listen. However, that's also unearthed another underbelly, I believe, which has, I believe, fueled the war, that there is this almost this zero-sum game in people's minds that for the Me Too movement to succeed, that men have to lose, right? For women's voices to be heard, men's voices have to be snuffed. That's such a common feeling and belief. I don't believe it. I did. So what is the danger in this broad stroking and demonization of men that has come out of the Me Too movement? It's not the first we've seen it, but I mean, it really has been highlighted in recent times. What's the danger there?
Well, I'm gonna say something out loud that I did say in the book that may or may not ring true for others, but it's not a commonly held perspective, I think. Is that I think first and foremost that men need to acknowledge and honor and admit that we've done some bad shit for a very long fucking time. That we have caused war, pestilence, famine, destruction, damage. We've damaged women, we've damaged the earth, we've damaged the environment. I believe it's the male principle gone awry, that is growth and upward and forward and penetrative for everything, has gone too far. I don't think that women trust men very much. And how men come into accountability, you know, do we get on our knees and apologize? How do we do this? We do not have a language for accountability and vulnerability in the real world. We're beginning to live and teach and understand the healing qualities and capacities inherent in vulnerability and accountability. When the Me Too movement came out, I posted shit on Facebook and I said, hey guys, we need to just, you know, take stock in yourself. Where have you contributed to what they're pointing to?
Yes. Where have you been perhaps complicit?
Complicit.
Right?
You may not have been a rapist, but you turned your deaf ear and your blind eye to what was going on somewhere that you could have said, hey, that's not cool.
Guilty.
We got to be responsible for that. And I think, you know, I don't think women want us to get on our knees and say, oh, mea culpa. They just want men to step up and say, you know what? I fucking did that shit. And I'm sorry. And I'm learning how to reframe and redirect my masculine. I'm learning how to counterbalance my masculine with some tender qualities of care and vulnerability and willing to say, I'm fucking sorry, I made a mistake. I'm sorry, oops.
Yeah.
If men can begin to step into that place of vulnerability and learn the emotional language of how to do that.
Yeah.
And discover the healing and power in accountability. When I say, you know, wow, I was afraid that when I said that to you, and I was very shaming, and I'm sorry that it hurt you, and my heart aches.
Yeah.
I apologize. How powerful that is in relationship to somebody.
Yeah.
If you know, I called several women when that Me Too thing happened. I called and wrote to several women who I thought I had hurt and abused. And I said, I'm sorry to each of them. And they were so grateful that I did that. I had to clean my own house before I could ask anybody to clean theirs. So I think in order to create the link between the fierce and the tender within, between men and women in the world, partnering, sharing the strengths and the weaknesses of fierceness and tenderness, that men and women can come together to solve the problems of the world. But I think men have to lay down their sword, and I open my introduction. You have that book in front of you? Open
Kindle.
to the beginning of the introduction, if you would. If not, I can read it. It's a poem by Hafiz. Let me read it, okay?
I've got it. I have come into this world to see this. The swords drop from men's hands, even at the height of their arc of anger, because we have finally realized there is just one flesh to wound our beloveds.
I hope you're enjoying the Mankind podcast. The Mankind Project supports all kinds of men with men's groups and programs aimed at building self-awareness, improving relationships, and upping your game. If you're willing to take the next step and you're a man of color, check out the men's work for BIPOC men. Find out more in the show notes.
And we're not there yet.
No.
We're still waving the sword and rallying up the flag, and it happens at every level in our culture and across the planet.
Yeah. I mean, look to a recent leader of our country. Did you ever hear ownership or sorry or no, or many leaders of our countries? Have you ever heard them say, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, own up to it?
No.
I mean, I had a friend of mine, he doesn't listen to this show. Guarantee he doesn't listen to the show, because it took him 11 years of friendship to finally hear him for the first time ever say sorry. It stopped me in my tracks.
Yep.
And I couldn't do anything but honor him for how hard that must have been.
For him to admit that.
Because it's easy for me to go, Brandon Cliff sat in men's groups for 7 years and in this work and podcasts. It's easy for me to go, look where I am, and he's this juvenile, can't even say sorry man. But there's no healing involved there. There's no connection there. But the fact that he even said sorry was like,
yes.
Even though part of me was
now there's room for a relationship.
Now there's room. Exactly. And I can tell you, there was a part of me that was like, yeah, that's right, motherfucker. Like, that's right. You're sorry.
Of course.
I wanted to get petty with it, but to stop in the moment and go, man, that took just about every inch of willpower that he has to even utter the words. And it's tough. It's tough. And you were talking about, do we get on our knees and beg for forgiveness and apologize? We've seen that. We've seen that after the women's movement through the 60s and 70s. We've seen men lay down the swords per se, but also abdicate their own power.
That's right. That's the difference now.
Yeah.
Is fierceness has great value and it cannot be denied. When it's coupled with tenderness, it softens the edges. A sword is a valuable tool, but it does many more things than cut people's heads off and gouge people's guts. It cuts through bullshit to the truth. And that's the beauty of our work, is it is both fierce and tender. Without ever having that knowledge, those words calling it that, there's a tremendously fierce quality. You know what our weekend looks like. Friday night is fierce as fuck. And Saturday right through. But once a man drops and acknowledges the shit that's inside him in a real way, men love the shit out of him. We are fierce and tender, and we need to be fierce and tender, and women need to be fierce and tender too. When we each own the contragender archetype, men owning the feminine and women owning the masculine in an integrated way, then we can partner to fix the world. I don't think I'll see that in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I'm sad to say.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of this book that you've written. It's a passing of the torch to allow people like myself to carry this on, whatever this is, in the best words or model that I can. But what you're talking about there is that awareness and acceptance that I, as a male, have feminine characteristics and qualities, and that they're not mutually exclusive to gender. Right. We've said that a lot on this show, and I'll continue to say it because that's such a common place of misunderstanding, is that, oh, if I'm feminine, then I'm being all those things that I was told on the playground that you could never be.
That's right. You're still living inside the man box.
Bingo. Whereas it can go to the complete opposite side. I've been totally entrenched in my feminine, and I've been told it is one of the least attractive
things about you to your woman.
Yes. Bingo. And there are times where I got to be in that masculine pole, hard, solid. Like we're talking David Data's way of superior man, solid stuff right here.
That's right.
right? But there's time and place. It's not fixed. There's an ability to hone both. And I can tell you right now, I would not be engaged to the woman I'm about to marry if I didn't take the journey into my feminine, because I dated masculine woman after masculine woman after masculine woman, all to realize, holy shit, I'm dating my mom, a very, very masculine woman. She gets shit done. Doesn't need padded shoulders. There's no ceilings for her.
That's right.
Blasted through all of them. Never knew they were there, right? And then I got to a point where I'm like, why after a year, let's just say, I'm not attracted to this woman anymore? They're so masculine. And it was because I didn't have it myself.
That's right.
So I was a vampire. I was an energetic vampire to these women because they had something I wanted, thinking I was looking to the feminine because they had tits. Right?
Yep.
So that was such an aha for me to go, man, and you got me to read the book, Lying with the Heavenly Woman. If I want to fall in love and identify a woman that is going to be the person I choose to spend the rest of my life with, I need to know what that looks like for me. I need to journey and venture there first before I'll even identify it. And funnily enough, the woman I'm going to marry, I've met before 7 years ago. I didn't see it then, but I sure as heck see it now.
While we're in this conversation, I want to also clarify that, number one, we're talking about heterosexual relationships.
But yeah, this is my lens.
and we're looking, both of us are heterosexual men looking through that lens. I do not claim to know anything about homosexual relationships. But I make an assumption, which may or may not be true, and I'm willing to be wrong on this, that within each human being, there are masculine qualities and feminine qualities. I keep trying to make the case for masculine and feminine being archetypal energies, complementary archetypal energies that exist in every human being. That there is a fierce aspect to who we are and a tender aspect to who we are, regardless of our gender, regardless of our genitalia, regardless of who we choose to love and how we choose to do that. Those energies are pure and they dance inside us and between us. The more consciousness we bring to that, the better dancers we become. So I just want to clarify that when I'm talking about masculine, feminine, I'm not talking about male and female. I'm talking about archetypal energies that look this way from the masculine side and look this way from the feminine side.
Good catch, Dene. There's so much nuance to this that it isn't linear where we can assign. I mean, case in point, we can't just assign these circumstances to heterosexual relationships. So
that's right.
No, thank you. Great catch there. And
good. Thank you.
We got 13 minutes for this, for the rest of this interview. I'm going to make an executive decision. That we make this part one.
Okay.
We make this part one. We carry out and we close out this first one, and then we get together in the next week or two.
Good to go.
Perfect.
I'm good to go.
So I want to move now into relationships, right? So we've gone from childhood to early adulthood, and that's when you began your exploration of self, started to break out of the linear path and the box, right? Through psychedelics and through your experiences in college, and then through therapy in your mid-20s. What were relationships starting to look like for you, and how was this model of manhood and masculinity turning up in your intimate relationships?
Not good. I've been chasing tail since I was 3 years old. I see a picture of myself on one of my old blogs of me standing up next to the girl next door, a little blonde girl sitting in a chair. She's got her hands on the armrests, and I've got my hand on top of her hand. I'm 3 years old. My first girlfriend. I've always been attracted to girls because I'm built like that. And that's the kind of energy, and that's what I've been programmed to do. But I also had another ulterior motive. I could express my sensitivity to girls in a way that I couldn't to boys. I could have conversations about the tender parts of me, the more sensitive and artistic parts of me with girls than I could with boys.
Yeah.
So, I've had girlfriends since I was 3. I went to college in the 60s where the sexual revolution happened, and I was lockstep in that.
Rode the wave.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I did that through most of my 30s. It wasn't until I was in Chicago, I was 38 years old. I was sent to Chicago on a job assignment, that I had a visitation by a woman that I was friends with from New York. She was an old fuck buddy. And she came out to Chicago, and we spent about a week together. And we went to the theater, we went to the ballet, we went to restaurants, and we stayed in bed. And when she left, I dropped into a terrible funk. I was a depression. I'm not depressive type, so I'm hesitant to use that word. I was in a dark space. And out of that, I realized that I asked myself, why is sex not fun anymore? It doesn't have the same thrill with the same drugs and the same music and the same, psychedelic aura that sex had for me when I was in my 20s. But it wasn't that anymore. And I realized that my heart never participated in my sex. I might care about a woman enough to get her into bed, enough to drive her home, but not enough to call her up and see her a second time and say, how about let's go for a walk in the park and have a conversation. No, I didn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And I realized that my head liked sex. It did everything that I could do to arrange the situation where I could be sexual. And my cock easily responded, but this was vacant. And I would end up dark, feeling shitty afterwards.
Yeah.
And that happened. And I made a commitment to myself at 38 years old. I said, I'm going to be celibate until such time as I can let my heart participate in a sexual relationship with somebody. She doesn't have to be my bride. She doesn't have to be the one. I don't have to fall in love with her, but I need to feel something. 2 years, I was celibate. 2 years. At the end of that 2-year cycle, I did the Warrior Weekend and came out with a whole reframe of me as masculine, still celibate. 2 weeks after my initiation, I met Ming. 2 weeks after.
Met your wife. Wow.
Yes. And my work, men's work, and my marriage have been two snakes dancing throughout the whole last 34 plus years.
Amazing.
And I admit that I was never monogamous in any relationship prior to this one. And I've never violated my sacred commitment to monogamy in this relationship, and it's now 34 years old. Transformative. That awakening that my heart and my sex were strangers to each other. That awakening changed my life.
Making love versus getting a root, as we'd say in Australia.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing, Dene. And, same case for Boyson, fellow host of the show. 17 years ago, he got into this work 17 years ago, united with his
Met his wife.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Something to be said for that. This is not an ad for those of you hopeless romantics out there seeking to find the one, but just maybe.
Read the book.
Read the book. If you want everlasting, passionate sex for the rest of your life, you need to get your hands on Fierce and Tender.
And put the dots of your life together in a framework that says, this is what I've been doing.
Yeah.
This is what works. This is what doesn't work, and a commitment to change what doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because you keep on doing it the way you've been doing it, you keep on getting what you've been getting.
Mm-hmm.
It's time for men to change in a whole shitload of ways.
Yeah. And that's what we say about the old mold of masculinity. Perhaps it just doesn't fit you. Perhaps it doesn't fit you. You know what? There are people on this planet, fits them to a T. They couldn't be more content turning up that exact same way. Man box is their happy place.
Yep.
And that's their prerogative, right? Regardless of the impact it has on others. That to them, clear as day, works for me. But perhaps it doesn't work for you. And I judge if you're listening to this right now, it doesn't.
I judge that we need to bust open the man box because it's killing us. And all of our health markers and suicide markers are going through the fucking ceiling.
Yeah.
Because men are discontented, they're lost, and they're not happy campers. And when we're not connected to our hearts, we're just trouble waiting to happen.
Yeah.
We have to raise the banner of men's work and getting men to wake up to their emotional side, wake up to reclaim their fierce masculine that's not violent. That's not violent. That's not hurtful. Yeah. And wake up and begin to do our work and transform into a healthy, healing masculine that when coupled with the feminine inside each of us and with each other, we can build a new way to live this life. And that will be when Aquarius ascends.
That just makes me think of the song. Yeah, this is the dawning of the age.
That's right.
Is that what it was? That's
what it was. Right.
Now, this is totally getting into broad territory, and I do have one final question. But before I do, a slight tangent. Getting my hair cut today. By shout out to Dustin, and he was saying that the last Aquarian age we had was the French Revolution. And his words, Dustin, the hairdresser. That's the source, right? I'm not quoting.
Yeah. Well, if you do a little bit of research on astrology, you see that the Piscean age has been here for 2,000 years.
Oh, wow.
The Piscean age began with the birth of Christ.
Right.
And each age in this, there's 12 ages, 2,000 years each. We are coming to the end of that 24,000 year cycle because the last Pisces is the last of the 12. Aries is the first of the next set of 12. And we're at that liminal space of overlap, ending a 24,000 year cycle, 2,000 of which the last 2,000 has been Piscean, which is about suffering and nationalism and religion and all of the steeped in ways that we see still very alive on the planet.
Of course. And
the Aquarian, beginning of the Aquarian age is a new 24,000 year cycle. We're in that overlap. We're in that liminal place. And the values of Pisces age and the values of Aquarian are in direct conflict with each other. And I fear that it's not going to end anytime soon. That's just what I tell myself. I pray that some miracle happens and it accelerates, but who knows? All I know is I'm the plank on the bridge, and I got to take my place there and hopefully give them some stability for them to walk over me into this new place. My sons, how old are you?
29.
29. My sons are 28 and 26. In the same, you're here to do this healing work because you're going to rebuild the shit that we've made a mess of.
Yeah. Well, and here's the beautiful thing about that plank analogy. And I actually haven't shared this on the show yet. Oh, I'm going to be a dad in November.
Really?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
It will change your fucking life.
Well, he or she's going to be a Scorpio. So yeah, of course it will. But no, that's what making it more. I've always said, how do we leave this planet in better hands? Right. But that's always been lip service. That's always been a head thing that I've said. But it's a feeling thing now to be like, ooh, wow. Like how I turn up now. direct impact and consequences, not just on me or my fiance. There's a knock-on effect generationally now.
That's beautiful, Brandon. You know, I was 46 and 48 when my sons were born, very steeped in the work. And when they were babies, they knew that they were going to go do a warrior weekend when they turned 18. And by God, they both did. Kicking and screaming, but they both did. And they both got something of value from it. And I don't know that they've followed my work, but one son just finished reading the book and they're both in it.
Yeah.
And the younger one is beginning to read the book. So I'm curious to see what feedback I get from my sons about the story I tell about them and me.
Sure. Hey, fair enough. Well, hey, my dad's probably jealous. He listens to just about every episode. So, hey, Dad.
Good. Yeah, and he's very proud of you. He's very proud of you.
He is.
He's told me that. He may not have told you that, but he's told me that.
No, he knows to tell me that stuff, and I appreciate it. But no, he couldn't get me at 18. No way. This stuff's for broken men, Dad. I'll wait till things get really messed up to get into the work.
Yes.
And I mean, how wrong was I? This is for those that are living in a place of surplus, not deficit as well in their lives. I said I had another question for you, and I'm going to tease the audience and save it for next time as we talk about. I want to dive deeper into the impact on our health and how we as men have been causing a lot of harm to ourselves because of the man box, because of the ways we've been engendered to turn up as men. So yeah, I want to get into that. I want to get into fatherhood in our next interview. And yeah, man, just the time spent with you, Dene. Thank you. I really appreciate the generosity of this. And any final comments before we wrap up?
My book can be found on Amazon. Fierce and Tender, Healing the Deep Masculine is the title. Dene Maria Sebastiana is the author. Please take a chance, read it. It's a great read. I've gotten nothing but positive responses from it. Put it out on your social media feeds. I'd like to see this go viral. Not that, I mean, the money would be nice. The fame, I'm not so sure about, but the message. I want the message out there in the world. I believe that what I've said has a capability of being transformative for many. If it's my legacy, then so be it. I'll be proud of that. Read it, share it, talk about it, send a review on it, positive, negative, whatever. Bad press is better than no press.
Well, that's the beauty of, connecting with men and men's work is if your book was trash, they'd tell you. They would have told you. So the positive feedback is what I've read so far has been absolutely incredible. Dene, if you want to be viral, this is from a millennial coming to a baby boomer. We have to get you on TikTok. We've got to get you doing dances, like the dances that the kids do. We're going to get you doing like all the trendy stuff. And yeah, mate, I'm telling you, that is how you become successful in today's age.
Good. So how about you and I have a follow-up conversation about that? Okay.
Sure. Well, for those of you listening, thank you for joining us again for another episode of the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than one way to be a man. And I believe we have done that today. For links to Dene's book, you can find them in the show notes, and to his website, his blog, where you can find out more about his coaching services and his trainings that he puts on with George Durrani and many other powerful men in Arizona, Desert Wisdom. So you can find out all about that through the links in the show notes. Lots of love, and we will see you next week. This has been another episode of the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. We have been your hosts, Paul Newell, Boyson Hodgson, and myself, Brandon Clift, and we want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. If you want to find out more about today's guests and support them in their mission, you can find links to them in the show notes. Now, if you have found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, we are always grateful for a rating and review of the show on iTunes. Now, we've got to give special thanks to our back-end team, producer, editor, and audio ninja for the show, Michael J. Russer, and Don Huff, who takes care of our graphics and promotions and pretty much makes us look pretty. So, of course, thank you, Don. Now, above all else, we've got to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you have made it possible for us to let men all over the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if something in this episode has touched you, then perhaps it is the call to action to get involved in men's work. With live trainings happening constantly and in-person trainings happening all over the world, the Mankind Project definitely has something for you. Now, if you've enjoyed the music in this episode and all of our episodes, be sure to check out Jim Donovan and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. And lastly, just know, what it means to me to be a man is completely different than what it means for you. What it means for Paul, what it means for Boyson, that is the beauty of this journey. So if you are looking for guidance, support, and community as you begin to unpack and dive deeper into your men's work journey, then you know where to find us. Same place, same time, next week. Lots of love. We'll see you then.